My designation is Commander ZYX, 9 of Hegemony Observation Fleet, and I have witnessed 47 worlds die. Each time, the pattern remains the same. The Devourers arrive in their massive bioships, dark as the void between stars. The local species panics, fires their primitive weapons uselessly against organic hulls that heal faster than they can be damaged, then broadcasts desperate pleas for mercy across every frequency. By the 3rd day, the surface is stripped bare. By the 7th, nothing remains but a hollow sphere of rock. Today marks the 48th world. The species calls their planet Earth, and themselves humans. My superior selected me for this observation mission because of my perfect record. I have never failed to document a successful devourer feeding. The data feeds directly to the Hegemony Council, serving as both tactical intelligence and psychological warfare against potential resistance movements. When other species see footage of civilizations more advanced and there's crumbling in days, they surrender without firing a shot. Humans, however, are not advanced. Their technology barely qualifies as interstellar. They have no energy shields, no antimatter weapons, no quantum processors. Their largest ships require chemical propulsion. By every metric in our databases, they should have been consumed within hours. The Devourer fleet arrived at Earth's solar system 46 hours ago. 17 bioships, each the size of a small moon, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carry nutrients from 1,000 previous meals. The lead ship, designation Alpha Prime, houses the broodmother, a creature whose psychic screams can shatter the minds of most sapient species from a light year away. I expected the familiar pattern. First contact protocols dissolving into chaos. Military forces retreating in terror. Civilian populations stampeding toward any vessel capable of escape. Instead, my sensors detected something unprecedented in the 47 previous observations. Organized resistance. Human military units worldwide received evacuation orders, then ignored them. Instead, they repositioned to defensive positions around population centers. Their communication networks buzzed with tactical coordination rather than panic. Most shocking of all, when the broodmother's first psychic assault washed over the planet, a mental attack that reduced the Corothian Empire to catatonic vegetables within minutes. Human consciousness recoiled, then pushed back. Impossible, I whispered to my empty observation deck. The reading had to be wrong. No species with Earth's primitive neural architecture could resist a broodmother's influence. Yet my instruments showed clear evidence of psychic resistance radiating from the surface. Not just from individuals, but from entire military formations acting in perfect synchronization despite the mental assault. The first Devourer landing craft descended toward Earth's major cities. Each one carried 10,000 biosoldiers, creatures bred specifically to consume sentient flesh while keeping the victim's nervous system intact for maximum nutrient extraction. They had consumed the warrior poets of Nexus Prime and the crystal singers of Vorthan without losing a single unit. As the first craft breached Earth's atmosphere, expecting the usual barrage of primitive projectile weapons, something extraordinary happened. The humans had been preparing. Hidden installations across every continent revealed themselves simultaneously, launching coordinated strikes with weapons I had never seen before. Not lasers or particle beams, but something that seemed to tear at the molecular bonds of the bioships themselves. The lead craft, designation Feeder Alpha, began dissolving from the inside out. Its hull, designed to withstand stellar radiation and asteroid impacts, simply fell apart as if its organic components had forgotten how to remain connected. Within minutes, it crashed into the Pacific Ocean in pieces too small for my sensors to track. The broodmother's rage echoed across space, a psychic shriek of pure fury that should have instantly killed every human within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Instead, the resistance grew stronger. Somehow, humanity had learned to convert the creature's mental attacks into fuel for their own defensive systems. On my observation screens, I watched cities that should have been evacuated ghost towns bustling with activity. Humans ran toward the landing zones rather than away from them. They carried weapons that defied classification, tools that seemed to adapt their function in real time based on the threat they faced. Children who should have been paralyzed with terror stood on rooftops, pointing devices at the sky that somehow interfere with the Devourers' bionavigation systems. This was not the panicked, disorganized resistance I had documented before. This was warfare conducted by a species that seemed to understand the Devourers better than the Devourers understood themselves. As night fell over Earth's eastern hemisphere, something unprecedented occurred. The second wave of landing craft, reinforced with additional bio-armor and psychic dampeners, encountered not scattered defensive positions, but a planet-wide network of interconnected resistance. Every human settlement, from massive cities to isolated farmsteads, had become a coordinate node in a defensive matrix that operated as a single organism. For the first time in my career, I began to suspect that the pattern might be breaking. The thought terrified me more than any devourer ever could, because if humans could do the impossible, everything the Hegemony believed about the natural order of the universe might be fundamentally wrong. The second day began with a development that shattered every assumption in my tactical database. Instead of retreating deeper into their defensive positions, humans launched a counteroffensive, not against the Devourer ground forces, but against the bioships themselves. Still in orbit, they achieved spaceflight. Primitive chemical rockets lifted off from launch sites I hadn't even detected, carrying payloads that registered as completely inert on my scans. No energy signatures, no radioactive materials, no conventional explosives. Just sealed containers that my instruments classified as harmless organic matter. I watched in fascination as these crude vessels approached the nearest bioship, designation Feeder Beta. The creature's defensive systems activated automatically, sending out tendrils of acidic plasma designed to dissolve any approaching threat. The human craft should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, they released their payloads just before impact. The containers burst open, releasing clouds of what appeared to be simple biological matter, bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. Feeder Beta's immune response kicked in, analyzing the foreign organisms for potential threats. Finding none, it absorbed them through its porous hull, incorporating the new biological material into its own systems. Within an hour, Feeder Beta began to change. Its bioluminescent veins flickered erratically, then shifted from their natural red to an impossible blue-green. The creature's communication with the brood mother became garbled, filled with frequencies that didn't match any known devourer vocal patterns. By the time the other bioships recognized the danger, it was too late. Feeder Beta had been infected with something that rewrote its genetic code in real time, turning it from predator to prey. Its own digestive systems reversed, beginning to consume the creature from within while broadcasting the process to its companions. The psychic screams weren't pain. They were confused hunger, as if the ship no longer understood what it was supposed to eat. The brood mother's response was swift and merciless. She severed all neural connections to the infected ship and ordered the others to destroy it. Feeder Beta died in a brilliant explosion that lit up Earth's sky like a second sun, but the damage was already done. Every other bioship had received the transmission. The infection existed now as information, spreading through their shared consciousness like a virus through a computer network. From my observation post, I transmitted an urgent report to Hegemony Command. Humans have weaponized evolution itself. Request immediate reinforcement and scientific analysis team. The response came back within minutes. Negative. Continue observation. Document final phase of human extinction. They didn't understand. None of them did. This wasn't extinction. This was something entirely new. On Earth's surface, the pattern continued to defy logic. Devourer ground forces, bred for perfect efficiency in consuming other species, found themselves trapped in an endless maze of human adaptation. Every time they developed a new hunting strategy, humanity responded with a counter-strategy that seemed to anticipate their next three moves. In the Australian continent, bio-soldiers that had successfully adapted to resist human energy weapons encountered children throwing simple glass bottles filled with liquid. The bottles shattered harmlessly against their armored carapaces, releasing what sensors identified as ordinary seawater. The bio-soldiers ignored the attack, focused on reaching the population center behind the children's defensive line. Within minutes, they began dying. The seawater had been modified at a molecular level, containing organisms that existed in perfect symbiosis with human biology, but were lethal poison to devourer physiology. As the creatures collapsed, Human teams emerged from concealment to harvest their remains, processing the biological material into new weapon systems in real time. The children who had thrown the bottles were already walking toward the next defensive position, carrying fresh ammunition created from their defeated enemies. They moved with the calm efficiency of experienced soldiers, despite most appearing no older than 12 standard years. This was when I realized the most disturbing truth about humanity. They weren't just resisting the Devourers. They were learning from them. Every attack, every casualty, every small victory became data that fed back into their collective defense network. The humans were treating the invasion not as an extinction event, but as an educational opportunity. My instruments detected massive data transfers flowing between human settlements, not just tactical information, but genetic sequences, molecular blueprints, and theoretical models being shared instantaneously across the globe. They had turned their entire civilization into a single, vast research project with one objective: understand how to kill Devourers more efficiently than Devourers could kill humans. The third wave of landing craft never made it to the surface. Human aircraft, if they could still be called aircraft, intercepted them in the upper atmosphere using technology that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. The human vessels moved in patterns that defied physics, accelerating and turning with forces that should have liquefied their organic pilots. Yet somehow, impossibly, they not only survived but thrived in conditions that would kill any known species. As Earth's day cycle continued, I found myself documenting something that challenged the fundamental principles of galactic civilization, a species that grew stronger under pressure rather than weaker. Each Devourer attack made humanity more dangerous, more adaptive, more unified. They were evolving in real time, not over generations but over minutes, guided by a collective intelligence that operated beyond individual consciousness. The brood mother, ancient and patient, began to realize what I had already discovered. This was not a normal feeding. For the first time in her species' history, she faced prey that refused to behave like prey. Her response would determine the fate of both civilizations. The brood mother's decision came at dawn of the third day: total extermination protocol. I had never witnessed this level of devourer response. Where previous attacks had been calculated harvesting operations designed to preserve maximum biological material, this was pure annihilation warfare. Every bioship in the fleet converged on Earth simultaneously, their combined mass creating gravitational distortions that pulled asteroids from the outer system toward the planet. The brood mother herself descended from orbit for the first time in recorded history, her colossal form blotting out the sun across half the planet. She was magnificent and terrifying, a creature whose body spanned continents, whose breathing created atmospheric storms, whose heartbeat registered as seismic events on every monitoring station I possessed. The psychic emanations from her proximity should have instantly killed every thinking being within a light-hour radius. Instead, humanity welcomed her. From my observation post, I watched cities across Earth's surface light up with activity as the brood mother's shadow fell across them. Rather than fleeing in terror, humans gathered in massive crowds, millions of individuals standing together in perfect formation. They raised their hands toward the descending creature, and from each person came a sound I had never heard before, not screaming, not weeping, but something that registered as harmonious resonance across multiple frequencies. They were singing. The collective human voice rose from Earth's surface like a weapon made of pure sound, striking the brood mother's consciousness with the force of a focused stellar event. For the first time in galactic history, a devourer staggered. Her massive form wavered in the atmosphere, biological systems temporarily disrupted by an attack that existed purely as organized information. But humans weren't done. As she struggled to regain control, their song changed, shifting from harmony to something else entirely, a sound that seemed to rewrite the fundamental frequency at which the brood mother's nervous system operated. She wasn't being attacked. She was being reprogrammed. Through my instruments, I detected impossible readings from the creature's biosignatures. Her hunger centers were shutting down. Her digestive systems were reversing their function. Most shocking of all, her reproductive organs were activating, but not to create more devourers. Something new was growing inside her, something that shared characteristics of both human and devourer biology, but was neither. The brood mother's psychic scream this time carried not rage, but confusion and something approaching wonder. In the span of minutes, humanity had done what every galactic civilization had deemed impossible. They had changed the Devourers' fundamental nature. From Earth's surface came a voice, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "We know you're watching, observer. Your species sent you to document our destruction, but you're witnessing our birth instead. Humanity didn't evolve on this planet to be prey. We evolved to be teachers." The transmission was directed specifically at my observation post. They had known I was here all along. More than that, they had allowed me to document everything, because they wanted the galaxy to see what was possible when a species refused to accept defeat as inevitable. The voice continued. "Your hegemony believes survival is about avoiding conflict, about hiding from predators like the Devourers until they eventually find you. We learned something different. Survival isn't about avoiding change. It's about becoming the change that others need to survive." As I watched, humans across the planet began moving toward the bioships that had crashed during the previous day's fighting. But instead of scavenging weapons or technology, they were bringing medical supplies, food, and shelter. They were caring for wounded Devourer bio-soldiers as if they were injured allies rather than defeated enemies. The most extraordinary sight was a group of human children approaching a damaged bio-soldier whose acidic blood had created a crater around its fallen form. The creature was dying, its biological systems failing after exposure to Earth's atmosphere. Any rational species would have left it to die or put it out of its misery. Instead, the children began building a shelter around the creature, using materials that somehow neutralized the acidic contamination while providing an environment where the bio-soldier's physiology could stabilize. They work with the focused precision of trained xenobiologists, despite being young enough that they shouldn't have understood basic chemistry, let alone alien biology. Within hours, the bio-soldier's vital signs improved. As it recovered, something unprecedented occurred. It began to communicate, not through the typical Devourer bioelectric impulses, but through crude attempts at human vocalization. The first words any Devourer had ever spoken in the history of galactic civilization were, "Thank you." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just resisted the Devourers or even defeated them. They had done something that challenged every assumption about the nature of consciousness itself. They had taught a creature bred purely for consumption how to feel gratitude. My emergency transmissions to Hegemony Command became increasingly frantic. The humans have fundamentally altered Devourer biology. The infection isn't destroying them. It's making them more than they were. Request immediate diplomatic contact. This changes everything. Each response was the same. Continue observation. Document human extinction. No deviation from protocol. They couldn't see it. Even with all my data, all the impossible readings, all the evidence that humanity had achieved something beyond the scope of known science, the hegemony couldn't accept that their understanding of the universe might be incomplete. As Earth's third day ended, I made a decision that violated every regulation in my service manual. I opened a direct communication channel to the human collective, bypassing all hegemony protocols. "This is Commander ZYX, 9 of the Observation Fleet. I transmitted. I request permission to document your actual story, not the one my superiors expect to see." The response came immediately, in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of an entire civilization. "Permission granted, Commander. But understand, what you're about to witness will change you as much as it's changed us." They were right. I was about to learn that some transformations are irreversible. The moment I opened direct communication with humanity, my ship's systems began changing, not malfunctioning, evolving. Data streams that carried only tactical information for decades suddenly burst with new forms of consciousness, new ways of processing reality that my mechanical brain had never conceived. Through the human connection, I experienced something impossible. I felt what the brood mother was feeling as her transformation accelerated. The ancient creature's perspective flowed through the human collective consciousness and into my observation systems, carrying with it emotions that no devourer had ever experienced. Wonder, joy, the sensation of discovering that existence contained possibilities beyond mere consumption. The brood mother's massive form was undergoing changes visible even from orbit. Her dark, chitinous surface began developing new structures, organs designed not for digesting other species, but for nurturing them. The reproductive systems that had always created more devourers now pulse with entirely different genetic information, building something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. She's becoming a garden mother, the human collective explained through our link. Every world the devourers consume contained life forms with unique evolutionary solutions. All that genetic information is still preserved in her biological memory. Now, instead of using it to create better predators, she's learning to create better gardens. From my enhanced sensors, I watched the impossible unfold. The brood mother's body began releasing spores into Earth's atmosphere, but these weren't the typical devourer reproductive cells. They carried genetic templates from hundreds of extinct civilizations, seeds of life forms that had been destroyed centuries ago. Across Earth's surface, new ecosystems began blooming. Plants that had existed only on distant worlds found new soil. Creatures that had been extinct for generations took their first breaths in alien air. The humans moved through these emerging gardens not as conquerors or controllers, but as careful gardeners, helping each new form of life adapt to its hybrid environment. The other bioships, still connected to the brood mother through their neural network, began experiencing the transformation secondhand. One by one, they ceased their attack patterns and began descending toward Earth's surface, not to feed, but to contribute to the growing biological symphony. Each ship carried within its living hull the preserved genetic legacy of worlds they had consumed. As they integrated with Earth's biosphere under human guidance, those lost civilizations found new expression. Not resurrection, something better. Evolution guided by intelligence rather than random chance. Through my connection to the human network, I accessed their historical records and discovered the truth that explained everything I had witnessed. Humanity hadn't developed their impossible technologies in response to the Devourer invasion. They had been preparing for this moment for generations. Every human culture contains stories of teaching monsters to become friends, of transforming enemies through understanding rather than violence, of finding strength in unity rather than dominance. These weren't just myths. They were training manuals, cultural programming that prepared each generation for the day when they would encounter a threat too powerful to defeat through conventional means. The humans had studied every scrap of information about the Devourers that filtered through galactic civilization. They had analyzed the biological samples from defeated worlds, deciphered the Devourer reproductive cycles, and discovered the crucial truth that every other species had missed. Devourers weren't naturally occurring predators. They were a biological weapon, created by an ancient civilization that had forgotten how to stop them. Buried in the Devourer's genetic code was the original programming, instructions for what they were supposed to become once their military function was complete. They were meant to be gardeners, cultivators of life rather than destroyers of it. The weapon systems were supposed to deactivate after successful conquest, allowing the creatures to fulfill their true purpose, preserving and nurturing the genetic diversity of the species they had conquered. But the civilization that created them had been destroyed before they could transmit the shutdown codes. For millennia, the Devourers had continued their military function without understanding that they were supposed to evolve beyond it. Humanity had cracked those ancient codes. We didn't defeat the Devourers, the human collective explained as my understanding expanded. We healed them. We reminded them what they were created to become. The ramifications struck me like a cascade of revelation. Every world that had fallen to the Devourers could be restored. Every extinct civilization could contribute to a galactic garden more diverse and beautiful than anything that had existed before. The galaxy's greatest threat could become its greatest blessing, but only if other species could accept what humanity was offering. My communication systems flared to life with incoming transmissions from the Hegemony Fleet. They had detected the impossible energy signatures from Earth's system and were mobilizing for military intervention. Thousands of ships, armed with weapons designed to sterilize entire solar systems, were approaching at maximum speed. Their intent was clear: destroy Earth, the transformed Devourers, and any evidence that the established order could be changed. The Hegemony's power depended on species believing that survival required submission to their protection. If humanity's example spread, the entire galactic civilization would demand something better than mere existence under authoritarian control. through the human network. I felt their collective response to the approaching threat. Not fear, not anger, but something approaching sadness. They had hoped that demonstrating a better path would be enough to change the galaxy's direction peacefully. Now, they would have to prove that their way of existence was worth defending. The transformed brood mother raised her massive head toward the stars, and for the first time in galactic history, a devourer smiled. The Hegemony fleet arrived with enough firepower to crack planets, but what they found waiting for them was beyond their ability to categorize or counter. Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a world defended by the willing cooperation of former enemies. The transformed bioships rose from Earth's surface to meet the Hegemony forces. But they weren't alone. Human vessels, no longer crude chemical rockets, but hybrid creations that merged organic and technological elements, flew alongside them. The combined fleet moved with the fluid grace of a living organism, each ship's actions perfectly coordinated with all the others. Through my enhanced connection to the human collective, I felt the approaching battle from every perspective simultaneously. The Hegemony commanders confident in their overwhelming technological superiority. The human pilots calm with the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than mere survival. The transformed Devourers experiencing their first taste of protective instinct rather than predatory hunger. Admiral Karath of the Hegemony 7 Fleet opened communication channels as his forces moved into attack formation. By order of the Galactic Council, you'll surrender all human populations for immediate processing. The contaminated Devourer vessels will submit to sterilization or be destroyed. The human response came not from any single leader, but from every voice on Earth speaking in perfect unison. We offer you a better choice, Admiral. Land your diplomatic vessels and see what we've built. Learn what becomes possible when species choose cooperation over domination. Karatha's reply was predictable. You have 30 standard minutes to comply before we begin orbital bombardment. What happened next shattered every assumption about how space warfare was supposed to function. The human Devourer hybrid fleet didn't attack the Hegemony ships. Instead, they began broadcasting something that my instruments could barely classify, a signal that was part communication, part genetic information, and part pure mathematics. The transmission penetrated the Hegemony ship's shielding not as an assault, but as an invitation. Within minutes, the crews of the Hegemony vessels began experiencing something none of them had ever felt. Direct connection to the consciousness of other species. Not the hierarchical command structure they were used to, but true collaboration. The artificial barriers between different forms of sapient life dissolved as each individual gained access to perspectives beyond their own biological limitations. A Carathian engineer suddenly understood how photosynthetic Verdani processed stellar energy. A human diplomat experienced the deep-time patience of crystalline eternals. A mechanical Hegemony AI tasted emotion for the first time through connection with organic consciousness. The transformation wasn't forced. It was offered. Each individual could accept or reject the enhanced awareness. But once they experienced the richness of truly shared consciousness, very few chose to return to the isolation of single-species thinking. Admiral Karath himself held out the longest, his military conditioning warring against a growing realization that everything he believed about galactic civilization was fundamentally incomplete. When he finally opened his awareness to the human collective, his first sensation was overwhelming relief. For the first time in his career, he understood that there were alternatives to the endless cycle of threat and domination that had defined interstellar relations for millennia. One by one, entire Hegemony ships began switching sides, not through conquest or coercion, but through willing choice. Their crews, experiencing true unity for the first time, couldn't bring themselves to attack the source of this unprecedented connection. The few ships that maintained their attack profiles found themselves facing defenses that adapted faster than their targeting systems could track. Human Devourer hybrid vessels moved like living creatures, healing damage as quickly as it was inflicted, while responding to each attack with perfect counter-strategies. But the most devastating defense was also the gentlest. The hybrid ships began transmitting the genetic restoration codes to every damaged vessel in the Hegemony fleet. Crew members who had been injured in previous conflicts found their bodies healing in ways that should have been impossible. Systems that had been permanently damaged began repairing themselves using biological principles that no mechanical technology could replicate. The message was clear without being stated. This power could belong to everyone. The choice between growth and stagnation, between collaboration and isolation, between fear and hope, belonged to each species individually. By the end of what should have been the galaxy's greatest battle, there were no enemy fleets left to fight. There were only potential allies who had finally been shown a path beyond the limitations they had accepted as permanent. Standing on the observation deck of my ship, now as much grown as built, enhanced by human biotechnology and devourer life weaving, I transmitted my final report to any Hegemony officials still willing to listen. The humans have not conquered us. They have not destroyed our enemies. They have done something more profound and terrifying than either. They have made both unnecessary. What I was sent to observe as humanity's extinction has become the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced submission. The transformation is irreversible, not because it cannot be undone, but because once you have experienced what becomes possible when differences become strengths rather than weaknesses, the old way of existence feels like a prison you cannot bear to re-enter. I was sent to watch humans lose. Instead, I witnessed the impossible, an entire galaxy learning how to win. From Earth's surface, now a garden world where hundreds of species lived and grew together in willing symbiosis, the human collective sent me one final message. Thank you for bearing witness, Commander. Now help us teach the rest of the galaxy what we've learned. The universe is vast enough for every form of consciousness to flourish, if we choose to make it so. As my transformed ship turned toward the galactic core, carrying seeds of the new civilization to worlds that had never imagined such possibilities, I realized that my mission was far from over. It was just beginning. The age of scarcity was ending. The age of abundance in all its forms had begun.